Good evening, YouTube family. This is your boy God's Child coming to you with another video, and I pray that everyone had a blessed day. In this video, we will be going into part 2 of Who Am I? I Am Who. And in this video, we will be breaking it down into 16 parts. So I hope everyone would like this video, give it a thumbs up if you like it. And please comment in the comments down below. So now let's get into the video.
This is your primary family group: your mother, father, brothers, sisters, your spouse, and your children. The term usually refers to the parents, our parent, plus their dependents, which can also include step-parents, step-siblings, and adopted children. This term was first used in the early 20th century to refer to a financially viable social unit and can be used in contrast with extended family, which includes aunts, uncles, cousins, and grandparents. Spouses. You don't need any blood connection to be a full-fledged aunt or uncle. Your mother's sister's husband is not your uncle-in-law, just because he isn't related to you by blood. He's only your uncle, fair and square. Nephew is the son of your sibling, and niece is the daughter of your sibling. As with uncle and aunt, these people are not considered your niece by marriage, or nephew-in-law, even though they might be your spouse's siblings' kids and not related to you by blood. They are simply your niece and nephew. The exception to the terms aunt, uncle, and niece, nephew would be when DNA is being considered. If you are not related by blood to that relative, that is if your familial connection is through a spouse, you will not share DNA and therefore might be considered in different terms, depending on the situation. Your cousin, also known as first cousin, full cousin, or cousin german, is the child of your parent's sibling. You and your first cousins share one set of grandparents. A cousin german, by the way, comes from cousin germain, which is French for first cousin. You and the child of your parent's cousin are second cousins. The two of you share at least one set of great-grandparents in common. Think of them as first cousins, because they are in the same generation as you, but with an added generation between yourselves and your linking ancestor. Similarly, your child and your cousin's child are second cousins to each other. Following the same equation as second cousins, third cousins are cousins with two added generations between yourselves and your linking ancestors. You and the children of your parents' second cousin are third cousins, and you share at least one set of great-great-grandparents in common. The same equation can continue for fourth cousins, fifth cousins, and so on. If your first cousin has a child, that child is your first cousin once removed. Removed refers to a difference in generation from you and your first cousin. You can also think of it relative to that shared set of ancestors that you share with your first cousin, which would be your grandparents. Removed simply means they're not in the same generation, Cowan says. If that cousin once removed has a child, then that child is your first cousin twice removed, because they are 2 generations removed from you and your first cousin. This removed business is often confused with labeling a relative a second or third cousin, who is inaccurate. A cousin of any degree will always be in the same generation as you, Cowan explains. As soon as you start adding generations, like children or grandchildren of a cousin, that's when we get to once removed, twice removed, and so on. If you're still confused, you can watch this video from Ancestry for a visual explanation. If you call your grandpa's sister your great-aunt, you are not alone. But technically, this terminology is incorrect, according to experts. Grand refers to the generation above your parents, as in grandparents, though great implies an added generation beyond that. Your great-grandparents are your grandparents' parents. So really, your grandpa's sister should be called your grandaunt. But don't worry, we won't fault you if you keep referring to her by the more commonly used great-aunt, and she probably won't either. These are the siblings of your great-grandparents. The parents of your great-grandaunt are your great-great-grandparents. This is your family by marriage. Your spouse's parents, spouses of your siblings, and spouses of your spouse's siblings. In-laws pretty much stop with your parents-in-law and your siblings-in-law. That is, your brother's wife is an in-law, but none of her siblings are. And your husband's sister's husband is your in-law, but none of his brothers are. You are not in-laws with the parents of your sister-in-law's husband. And the 2 sets of parents of a couple are not in-laws to each other, either. They are considered competitive parents or co-in-laws. This is your family by marriage. Your spouse's parents, spouses of your siblings, and spouses of your spouse's siblings. In-laws pretty much stop with your parents-in-law and your siblings-in-law. That is, your brother's wife is an in-law, but none of her siblings are. And your husband's sister's husband is your in-law, but none of his brothers are. You are not in-laws with the parents of your sister-in-law's husband. And the 2 sets of parents of a couple are not in-laws to each other, either. They are considered competitive parents or co-in-laws. Similar to your in-laws, your affinity relatives are your spouse's blood relatives. This can include your spouse's parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, and grandparents. Birth mother, biological mother, natural mother. These are terms for the biological mother of a child who has, usually, been adopted by other parents. These are any relatives related to you by blood but who is not a direct ancestor. So, if your immediate ancestors are your parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, and so on, your collateral relatives are your cousins, aunts, uncles, and siblings. Birth parent, biological parents, natural parent. These are all terms for the parent whose DNA you have. These are often used to explain the biology of a child who is adopted, or when one parent is absent. This refers to a parent or set of parents who have adopted a child. Biologically, the child is not their own. It's possible to be biologically related if the adoptive parent is an aunt, uncle, cousin, or some other blood relative. A step connection is the result of a marriage that did not result in a blood relation to you. For example, if your father marries a woman who is not your mother, she is your stepmother. Her daughter, who is not related to you by blood, is your stepsister. Within your family tree, these relatives take on the position that any biological relative would, that without a blood relation. This type of relationship can be applied to any family connection: step-parent, step-sibling, step-uncle, step-grandmother, and so on. When you and a sibling share one parent in common but not both, that person is your half-sibling. Similarly, your mother's half-sister is your half-aunt. Your half-sister's daughter is your half-niece. A half-cousin means that their parent is the half-sibling of your parent. I hope you see how our identity is a must when it comes to WHOAMI. Sometime, we not think its importance to us, but it is. We get to caught up its other things and forget about WHOAMI. I would like to take a better look at the chart that will better explain your identity. This chart shows the blood relationship of you to everyone else on the chart. 1. In-laws are relatives you gain when you or your siblings marry. A half-brother or a half-sister is someone who shares just one parent with you. These relationships are not illustrated in this chart. 2. The siblings of your grandparents are your granduncle or grandaunt, not great-uncle nor great-aunt. Similarly, the siblings of your great-grandparents are your great-granduncle or great-grandaunt. Also, the same nomenclature is used for grandnephew and grandniece. 3. Cousins are persons who are related through a sibling of one of your ancestors. You and a cousin will share one or more ancestors. There is no such thing as a half-cousin. 4. To determine a cousin relationship, first locate the nearest common ancestors. Count the number of generations, steps, up for each person to the common ancestor. 5. If the number of steps between each person and the common ancestor is the same, count the number of G's in the common ancestor's title. For instance, first cousins share the same grandfather or grandmother or both. There is one G in grandfather and grandmother, so that makes the first cousins to each other. 6. Second cousins share the same great-grandparents, so 2 G's yield second cousins. It is similarly done for more distant common ancestors. 7. If the number of steps between each person and the common ancestor is different, they are removed cousins, meaning they are one or more generations above or below you. Those above you on the chart are ascendant cousins, those below you are 8. Bob is 4 steps from your common ancestor, whereas you are only 3 steps away. You are closer to the common ancestors who are your G grandparents. They are Bob's G grandparents. Count the G's in the closest relationship, which in this case is 2. So, he is a second cousin but 1 generation removed from, below, you. That makes him your descendant 2C1R. 9. Sue is 2 steps from your common ancestor, whereas you are 4 steps away. Sue is the closest to the common ancestors who are her grandparents. 1 G makes her a first cousin 2 generations removed from you. She is your grandmother's first cousin. Since you are 2 generations below Sue, you and Sue are 1 C2R. 10. Watch out for titled relatives who may not be whom they seem to be. An aunt may be a grandaunt, or a cousin, and grandma may be a great-grandmother. Misunderstanding of the ancestor hierarchy is often a problem. 11. Some people may have a relative title, but they may not be related. Some are religious titles, father, sister, etc. Others may be given the title by everyone, not just relatives. 12. You may be related in more than one way with another person because of a marriage between relatives in an earlier generation. That creates more than one pathway to the common ancestor.